Welcome to my show, simply entitled Women Influencers, where you will find inspirational stories of successful women in business. I am Veronica Malolos, CCIM, founder and CEO of the Capstrata Group of Companies, providing commercial real estate development, brokerage, and property management services in the greater Orlando area. Today's guest is Karen Rands, best-selling author and a great advocate for creating wealth for angel investors and entrepreneurs. I had such a wonderful conversation with her. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe below. I welcome your comments and please share with someone who can benefit from this podcast. Hi, Karen. How are you today?
I'm great, Veronica. Delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited. And also because I feel so connected to you after we introduced ourselves a couple days ago. It's really cool. Thank you for being here. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump right in. I'm really, really excited to hear about your story, how you grew up in your environment and how you got to where you are today. So tell us, Karen.
So, sure thing. Life is sort of filled with aha moments and hindsight, particularly for folks that are in our age group that, don't get to be highly successful tech entrepreneurs under the age of 30, right? So, my story started, really being raised as a single mom and at early influencers that kind of led into the aha moment because my mom was a teacher. She was highly educated, but frustrated in life because not having, not really feeling like she had found her groove, kind of a thing. And that my parents divorced when I was 5, and what she had told me about my dad, because I didn't really get to know him until I was in high school, was that he was a dreamer and he couldn't keep a paycheck or could sustain and provide income for the family on a consistent basis, and so that was why she divorced. Years later I realized what had attracted them and what, based on her own fears about security, what had separated them. And I discovered that what she was talking about was because he had been an aeronautical engineer at Rand Corp and had invented or been part of the team that invented one of the first orbiters. But his passion
Wow.
was entrepreneurism and inventing. And so he had invented some of the first beauty bills. They were actually called beauty bills, and where he got his patent and ended up creating his wealth. That becomes part of the second part of the story is when he invented the first method for being able to do 5-color screen printing. So we take it for granted today with our t-shirts that have all different colors on them, but for a long time you could only do 2 colors, right? And there was a
Wow.
whole journey that I discovered years later, with that became part of this hindsight and the aha moments. But I grew up. I remember sitting in high school in the apartment complex that we lived in, and I don't know if it's because I was watching Dynasty or what it was, at the time, but I had this vision of what I was going to be when I grew up. I was going to be one of those women that would fly all over the world advising like these big wig executives or money people on where to put their money to work, what businesses to buy or merge or something like that. I don't even know how most of those words I just used, I didn't even know what they meant back then. I just had this vision of what I was going to do, and I did well in high school, and always was sort of grew up in Jacksonville Beach, so a big part of my environment was beach. Right, the high school I went to was something straight out of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. My mom, as a school teacher, she became a dean of girls, and so she was the one that I went to the school junior high. She was the sort of the person that gave you swats if you dean of girls, if you did something bad, you got in trouble, you got back then they would actually take a wooden paddle out and swat you. And when I was in high school, I didn't get invited to any parties, right? you know and but I had my friends, and it's funny when you look back and you go back and you go to class reunions and your perception of how you were perceived in high school compared to other people's was like night and day. But that was really sort of my perceptions of money and how I perceived money and the lack of it. And, this idea of how, sometimes people have to undo their thinking about wealth creation and money. And I still struggle with that today. I've had to work on it a long time, but that's a big part of what forms what I do nowadays when I advise folks about investing.
Well, do you stay in touch with your dad? Are you connected?
So actually, both of my parents are passed now. So,
Sorry to hear that.
and that leads into my aha moments with my dad, that because when I went off to college at Emory, this idea of what I was going to do, right? So I was going to get I went to, yeah, I had to get out of Jacksonville because of, the stigma of being the dean's daughter. And all my kids from my high school either went, it was a large high school, 3,000 students. Like we had over 700 in our graduating class. And so it was a pretty big high school. The and the idea that they were either going to University of Florida or Florida State. So my perception of those schools was like, oh my God, it's going to be just like high school, and I'm going to see all the same people again. And I want to break free, right? And so I got accepted up to Emory University, went there to get my degree. I picked economics because I had heard that you couldn't do business school right after getting to a undergrad business school. And
Yep.
so I wanted to pursue a combination of MBA and law, like business and law, as grad school. So economics seemed to be the good mix of that, like an in between thing that was kind of business but not. And then I minored in English, and so because I loved English, and I figured might as well get credit for reading books, things like that. So the and economics really formed a lot of my thoughts about how I think about everything. And years later, I ran into a friend at a pool party that had graduated with us. And she says, well, what are you doing now? And I described it. She goes, oh, you're a microeconomist. And I said, I never really thought of it that way. So that's one of the labels I take on that. But if you want me to get into talking about college, I can talk about how I reconnected with my dad then, and he was in the midst of this business. So when I never really knew him, when he was like the struggling guy, kind of a beatnik, living out in LA. And so when I knew him, he had this manufacturing business for this screen printing. Yeah, and I would go in the summers and help him at his shop. And he started as he had started doing iron-ons and creating iron-ons. And he called it like a walking billboard, right? Because you had somebody's iron on and you'd be walking around advertising for them. And he had a client that was, people that are listening that are from California may know of Hamburger Hamlet. Um, it was a very famous, and there's still a few of them, hamburger shop back when it was a big deal to get a hamburger with lots of stuff on it, fancy like that we take for granted now. And they wanted him to do a T-shirt that had all the colors, tomato, cheese, all the different colors on it. So he invented a way to do that to respond to this customer opportunity, and
Wow.
and that's what he got a patent on. That's what he built his equipment manufacturing business around, for manufacturing screen printing. So you still see him today when you go to a festival and there's people doing screen shit thing. Ranar Manufacturing, RANAR is his was the name of it. And so that was just, going out and hanging out in Venice, California, and working in his shops, and just sort of, it was like a whole new world for me because I had just been, at where my mom had a job and was home, every night and whatever. And so it was when he was passing, though, that I was out there and going through his materials to kind of create where you go, the memorial that people would go to at his service, and look through his books and all his stuff, that I discovered he didn't get the patent on that and start that business till he was 50.
Wow.
And so that becomes one of those aha moments that it's never too late to pursue your dream, right? I had gone
Absolutely.
through what we'll talk about later as my major challenge, and was not really feeling very inspired at that moment. At that time, I was had gone through some severe business setbacks and wondering what is the meaning of life? What am I going to do? I'd had this huge passion. The idea of compassionate capitalist movement had been born. But I didn't know what I was going to do with that. And as I was going through that and realized the age that he was, I was like, oh, wait, if he could do that then and kind of reinvent his life and go from this, whatever thing, ski bum, beach bum to, highly successful millionaire by the time he retired, by the time then I could just still do that. And I really believed in this power of creating wealth and the joy that you get because I ran this angel investor group for so long that it was something that I could inspire other people too. Didn't really know how to do that, but I said, if not me, then who? And I set about trying to figure out how to uh, shore up my belief and my willingness to go into the fire again, to get that fire in my belly to try again, and then and lead the compassionate capitalist movement, which led to me going back and writing my first book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, and as a how-to for that, thinking it would launch the movement. That became a whole nother learning curve that becomes part of the hindsight part of my story. Because it you think people, I realized in that particular case that people pick up a book, they read the first 100 pages, and if it's something that's challenging, they may not get through it. So
Yeah.
you have to lead them and inspire them in different ways in order to go through their own gauntlet to get to the point where they want to be, which is, learning how to invest in entrepreneurs.
And that you've done. You've actually just, I believe, inspired me because it's really great to hear stories like that where you're influenced by both of your parents in different ways and how you evolve into who you are. And that it could be at age 50, it could be at age 60, it could be earlier. Some people actually come into themselves probably in their 20s or even earlier. But yeah, what a great story. I wanted to ask you about a challenge that comes to mind that you overcame that you want to share with us. Please tell us about that.
So I had been at IBM and over a decade and navigated my way through with multiple different jobs, all touching on innovation, on kind of entrepreneurism, being an entrepreneur inside the company, bringing new products to market for IBM, and led into and going into the .com era that in helping the new reps because IBM had gone through a lot of layoffs at that point in time. I had survived, but now I was a seasoned person, even though I wasn't that long into it, in order to help these young entrepreneurs how to put things together, right? And so my job as a complex opportunity business manager was to work with startups, early stage companies that were doing innovation and novel things. I had spent a lot of time bringing wireless technology to market, mobile technology to market, and validating their business model so they could go out and get venture capital and come back and spend it with IBM because IBM was believed at the time, they had started to miss out on the big boys, the Amazons, the eBays, and things like that because the way their marketing model was structured. And so I left IBM to go pursue the passion of being in the parade, all this exciting stuff happening and not watching the parade go by. I joked that it was like the Animal House parade because in my bubble of IBM, I I didn't know about the outside bubble, right? And the outside bubble of the dot-com bubble was like this parade going into a wall and they all bang into the wall because they're all going into
Yeah,
this dead end alley, right? That was what the
that's
dot-com
right.
was. But I was going to go change the world with the software this company was doing and discovered that. But along the way, I got invited to an angel investor event. And I went in there and it was this amazing experience because all of the people in the room, which were mostly white males, were picking and choosing which deals were going to be the ones that they would invest in. And if they didn't invest in them, odds were that that company would not get to the next level. It took capital to get to the next level. And so they were picking and choosing who was going to be, what innovation, what solutions, what problems were going to be solved. I thought that was like, wow. And I remember to this day, I remember walking out of that event just with goose pimples. Like, this is where I was meant to be. This is where the world of entrepreneurism happens. And I went on to the founder of that angel group tapped me to be his girl Friday, help him with the events. I learned all about angel investing and why these investors pick this deal or not that deal and this kind of stuff. And I eventually ran that group, rebuilt it to be top 50 in the US, one of the top ones in the Southeast. But it wasn't until years later, okay, so what ended up happening, and this is where the challenge came, was I just sort of took things for granted. One of these things is that, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I discovered that it was broken and it was too late to fix when the Great Recession hit. And
Yeah.
so I had this vision at the time. I was building an online portal for entrepreneurs to connect with investors. I was going to roll out this national network of angel investor groups all over the country that would be connecting on this stuff, and it all just fell apart. Right, we were doing about $5 or $6 million in investments a year to nothing, and after 2 years of no investments, it was like, what's the point? Right, and the Great Recession hit me hard. I was bruised, not quite broken, but I realized that a big part was that, and this is where the compassionate capitalist thing came from, was because these investors had their money sitting on the sidelines. And I was like, the best way to create jobs, the best way to turn our environment around was to invest in the startups that are creating the jobs, that are creating new innovation that's going to spur whole markets. That's how our economy grows. And so I was coming out of that when I was discovering that it wasn't over. I could have a second story. And the aha moment in there, or the hindsight in there, was that I had not actually learned or heard the term angel investing until I walked into that room. So even though I was at IBM all those years talking about capital and helping companies get capital, I, angel investing was a secret. It was a secret to me. I knew it made sense when I first met those people because they're the capital before a company is bankable. They're the
Yeah.
capital before they're VCable. People hear of venture capital, but nobody was talking about angel investing. And they
No, absolutely. Absolutely agree. I mean, angel investing is the first stages of startups. I mean,
Yeah,
you go to your friends and your family and maybe the community and people like you and try to get as much or as little as you can to get started.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love
That's
it.
why I named the books Inside Secrets, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they're secrets that are just really, like, I'm still trying to create awareness about, right?
So you actually took a problem and instead of getting or feeling defeated, you came up with a solution. So I love that.
It took a long time. Think and Grow
Yeah,
Rich
yeah,
was a big part. I think, sometimes God opens up closes some doors and opens up other doors. And there's this sort of a philosophy that says you have to be ready. So you work to be ready because you don't know when the door is going to open or that opportunity is going to come to you, but you need to be
yeah,
ready. And
yeah,
so I the idea I had to I that the feel of failure and the feel of, like, the pain when you have something that you want so bad because the
mm,
world needs it, the world wants it, and yeah, you want to make money doing it, but you really want to make this difference, and then it doesn't work and you start to question everything. Why did I waste 10 years coming like this? God, why did you put this opportunity in front of me? I feel so strongly that I'm the one that like I need to be out there telling this story, and I need to be able to do this, I'm just struggling with this. Why, right?
yeah,
And so this thinking, the weeds. And here's the thing that I learned going through that process that some of your listeners will appreciate, is that it is so much better to keep thinking positive and do the work, working towards the unknown, but the faith that the unknown will come to you,
mm,
so that you can keep the weeds out of your brain of doubt, because doubt and looking at everybody has failure in their back, but we don't look back behind us. We look for us and we learn forward and we learn from the past so that we can be better in the future. And, I say, guess what? If I knew today what I learned yesterday, if I knew yesterday what I learned a week ago, a month ago, I would already have this done, but I didn't know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Absolutely.
it yet, right? And I had to learn it. And the only way I learned it was doing the work and taking one step in front of the next and believing that whatever I'm learning now, whatever gauntlet I'm going through now is leading to the vision and the purpose that I have, I believe is in my life.
I love that. And I hear so much passion in your voice, Karen. I'm just so connected with that. Well, I'm going to ask you, since the podcast is about women influencers, and from the way you've spoken just now, I believe that you've probably influenced not just women, but a lot of others out there, but especially women. So if there was one impact that you were most proud of, that comes to mind, what would that be?
It really would be that, whenever somebody's inventing something or disrupting a market with a new way of doing things, you need to verify that it works. Like it's not just theory, that it actually will work. And so when I did the first versions of what is now my training platform, the Compassionless Academy, it was just, your typical webinar, that where it's like 4 weeks, 4 days, and somebody go through it. And I had the resources because the first book has a lot of resources and tools for people to learn how to be an angel investor. And there were some women that were part of that course that went on to take what I taught in that first version of this, as sloppy and uncertain as I was, and how to deliver this information because the book by itself was not working. And I had this mission, right? And they built portfolios. They started to build portfolios. I still stay in touch with them, where they were income producing and investing in companies that they were passionate about, they were solving, finding women-owned businesses that they could back so those women-owned businesses could succeed and they could share in their success, which is part of what I think is the real beauty of crowdfund and angel investing, is that you get to really have a direct impact in solving the problems you care about and helping the founders. And, as I'm sure many of your audience knows, it's hard for women owned businesses to get capital. And
Yeah.
so few women actually are angel investors or crowdfund investors. And that is a big part of the mission that I'm on, to solve that problem, make that connection. And the feedback that they gave me, and their the new version, the full on, it's huge, what is coming live this week, so it'll be live when people listen to this, and them giving me feedback that, yeah, that was what I was missing in that first thing, and you've got it now. And so it is so full circle 360 for me to have gone out, facing that fear of imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to teach
Yeah.
this? I'm not
Yeah.
yet the gazillionaire that's making all these investments and have a huge portfolio. I have my own angel investments and I'm still waiting on exits on, right? But it's not a
Yeah.
never ending source of capital that I haven't built a portfolio of 100 companies, right? Like some
Yeah.
people. And so, that the validation from the people that I really want to help solve, to leap the wealth gap, I'm very proud of that.
No, absolutely. You should be. I mean, what an impact that you're doing right now. I mean, I'm so excited. Again, I feel like, I have four sisters and we are in business together. We just started one startup. It's a franchise and it's a wellness spa. And, I love it. I really, really love it. So if there was one piece of advice that you could give to our audience today, Karen, what would that be?
I would say get started, right? There's stats, so many women, whether they're married or not, don't really think of themselves as investors. They don't really think of themselves as, I have the ability to do this, that I'm smart enough. I grew up in a background where I know about this. They didn't come from a household that people were talking about investments or doing these kind of things. They may get the messages out in our communities that say, oh, in order to create financial independence, you need to be your own boss. But not everybody has what it takes to be their own boss. It's really, really hard to be a business owner and be successful at it. But you can take and I say, there's lots of asset classes. There's real estate, there's stocks and private equity assets, crypto, but there's also angel investing and crowdfunding that is lesser known, right? So look at them and decide which one. I like the idea of investing in entrepreneurs because you have the direct impact. All the other ones are transactional, right? You're
Yes.
buying and selling from somebody else. You're not actually having an impact on it other than maybe your own pocketbook. But when if you're trying to save up for real estate has gotten so crazy that it's hard to build a portfolio. And the reality that we've learned, everything's risky, is that sharing ownership with a bank doesn't mean you own it. That means
Yeah.
it is a big liability that you could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars just because of a bad tenant or a bad whatever, And
Yeah.
stocks, you can spend so much time picking out stocks, but then one sideways comment by somebody or viral this or that can drop the stock, regardless of what the metrics of that. But when you learn to invest in entrepreneurs, you're giving this founder what they need to implement before they get to revenue, or in the gap between revenue comes in and they've already got it, and you feel good about it. You feel good about it. And so women, it's like, believe that you can learn to invest, because as I teach in the second book, Inside Secrets to Crowdfund Investing, is an inspirational story. It's a how-to, but it's through a story lens of Jane. And the idea that we know a lot more than we give ourselves credits for, right? We go to school for one thing, and that's learned knowledge, right? Or that's earned knowledge. I forget, earned and learned, right? So earned knowledge, and then there's what we learn in life, right?
Yeah.
But like whatever career we're really doing, right? All our hobbies, our family experience, raising our kids, the things that we've learned in the process of just living life, and it's and you can apply those as part of a criteria of what what you think, what just like Buffett, invest in what you know. And then along the way, you can learn the basics of, business sense if you don't feel like you have it. Because when I talk to regular angels that have been doing it for a long time, and I'm like, the reason why we need the course, like what I'm doing, is that, some people don't know. If they're a regular working person, they don't know the difference between preferred and common stock, right?
Hmm.
Or an
Yeah.
LLC and a C corp. And it makes a difference when you're investing on the risk associated with that investment. And
Yeah.
seasoned investors have forgotten that. They learned it usually the hard way by losing. And so I'm seeking to prevent that by showing people, particularly women, how to do this in baby steps and learn and grow, so you can grow a portfolio over a period of time and be confident and competent in doing that.
I
And
love that.
and it's just, it's getting started. It doesn't take much, $500 a month, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love it a lot. So Karen, I think we've come to the portion of our interview where you get to ask me a question. So please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, as a fellow podcaster, right, Veronica, I know I get influenced by my guests. And so you have this wonderful show where you are interviewing women about their roles, all the questions you ask me. So I want to know the story or the person that you've interviewed out of the 100, who has influenced you, who has stayed in your heart or your mind, or triggered a change of direction for you in a profound way you weren't expecting until after the interview.
Sure. And thank you for that question. I think that I'm going to give you an answer that might sound a little bit organic, but the truth is, every one of my guests have influenced me. You see, one of my values is curiosity. And that's the reason why I love hearing people's stories, because there's always a lesson learned from every one of my guests. And can you imagine, like I've been interviewing more than 100 women whose impact on others has really also impacted me. And I want to just tell you that because you are my guest today, that you have impacted me in a way that makes me want to tell your story to others, especially, for instance, to those who are very close to me. For instance, my sisters, who we have just recently, as I mentioned, gone into business together. Now we're dealing with, of course, family dynamics and also capital raising and all that stuff. And I'll tell you that that what you've shared with me today is absolutely something I'm going to share with them. And so, yes, wealth building, I think, is one of the key advocacy efforts that I have, especially for women. And so, this, for instance, and I'm not saying that I wasn't influenced by any of the other guests, because sometimes it's about emotion, sometimes it's about dealing with grief, sometimes it's about becoming an entrepreneur, and sometimes it's just being a person, right? But this particularly, I think, is just so very powerful that I'll tell you that this is something that I align myself with. And so I'm really, really so happy just to have you today. And before we go, Karen, I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure there are others in my audience who want to connect with you. How do they connect with you?
Well, the easiest way, and I'm sure it's going to be in your show notes, is through my link tree because it has, my books, podcast, all my social media, freebies, the ebooks and things I give away. And that is a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/little LINK so for link, and then capital CCS for the Compassion Capitalist Show. And so it's little link, LINK, capital CCS. And that gets you everything that you need to connect with me and even an opportunity to set up a intro call.
Wow. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Karen, for this passionate and so wonderful story that you've shared with us. That was just not, um, I guess, informative. It was very touching. So I thank you for what you've shared, and I wish you the very best. I will stay connected for sure, Karen.
Yes, Veronica, I hope so. And I'm looking forward to subscribing to your podcast because I love that it's short. So it's definitely within a commute, and
Yep.
and all that
Yep.
stuff, or when I'm fixing dinner or whatever. So very excited to be a part of this. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and stay warm.
Yeah.